Yes, because I guess to kind of pick off where I was talking about before, when you do have the turn of the century, where things were going quite well up into the 1920s, and then obviously the Great Depression happens.
Mm,
John Maynard Keynes steps in with his new theories, where suddenly government becomes a lot more productive in society because they're used as a defibrillator, if you will, of how to jumpstart an economy.
mm,
And suddenly, we have new ideas that are coming out from this. The idea of full employment. So, in a World War One, and a World War Two scenario, when you do have a war effort where they the government is pumping money into the economy in order to for what they consider defending their countries. Suddenly, everyone is being employed in the war effort, and it's great to be a worker in these sort of societies because um, there's the obviously the rise of full employment. Suddenly, trade unions are forming, and progressive labor parties are forming, where
mm.
not is it just the capitalists that are being represented of society, but the ordinary worker. The many is being represented, and
Yes.
this all leads up to the 1960s, where America in the at the after the World War II has established the Bretton Woods system, which is basically the idea of pegging like a global economic system to the gold standard, and basically like all of the exchange rates are pegged on gold, where it's basically
Mm,
one
mm.
price, and we go from there. But in the late 1960s and going into the 1970s, suddenly when the US is not in a superior state anymore, it's not necessarily other countries that are owing money to it, it's actually owing money to other countries. Suddenly, it's thrown into an inflationary situation where um, it's owing people a lot of money. The Bretton Woods system is breaking down. People are losing their jobs, and
Mm.
at least in the outset of this, or at least the sunset of this, it looks like Keynesian economics is on the back burner.
Mm.
And with this new system, and at least wanting to fight the initial fight of how do we get rid of inflation, suddenly neoliberalism steps in.
Yes,
With
and I think it's important though to
Yeah,
clarify though that this government intervention you're talking about,
yeah,
Keynesianism,
yeah,
and like the stuff that led up after the turn of the century from the 19th into the 20th, it was up until that point there was this big liberal idea of limited government intervention and like
yeah,
promotion of the free market. It different from the neoliberalism coming in the 1970s as in the sense that capitalism was really taking off at the end of the 19th century and as it takes off, I mean, it's kicking into a certain, like, third or fourth gear. And the contradictions of capitalism are really starting to affect and hurt people. So
yeah,
capitalists are accumulating and concentrating their wealth and their power, but at the same time, they're crashing. There's systematic and periodic crashes and booms and busts kind of thing.
yeah.
And this is starting to make people think that a more social
Mm.
approach to the economy, not a free market institution, but a social and planned economy might be the way to do things moving forward. And so you have things like the rise of socialism on the back of the
Mm.
labor movement and the
Yeah,
union movement that you were describing before. And so you have people all like changing their opinions on government intervention as long as it fits a social purpose,
mm.
not a private purpose, but a social, I guess, objective being, promoting job growth and promoting infrastructure provision to provide resources and wealth distribution on a national scale for all people, not just, government intervention for private interests and setting up some type of welfare programs and having established working conditions for people. And like this is where you start to see retirement coming in for the first time, as well as healthcare. They're setting people up to have some type of social safety net or social security, as we would call it these days in welfare.
Yeah,
And
the
so it's a
big
different form of government
yeah.
intervention at this point, at the start of the 20th century.
Yeah, the big difference I would say between your more classical liberals, which I guess David Harvey would call it as embedded liberalism,
Mm,
um, they would view governments as unproductive, or at least they would say that they were extracting value and that sort of thing. So, in order to have a productive society, you kind of just have the market and you kind of focus on your much more productive
mm,
aspects of it. So, whether that's agrarian societies which are focusing on the land, whether it's Marxist-based ones which are focusing on revolutionary, the Industrial Revolution in terms of manufacturing, production, and that sort of thing. And
mm,
you kind of want to keep governments to the side. The difference to that with neoliberalism is oh, well, we have a market that's in equilibrium. We believe that private property and that markets, the government should just be a small government that doesn't really intervene, except when it's promoting our values. So we'll probably get into this, but you know, uh, the basically with the turn of to neoliberalism, what you actually found was governments had a lot of assets, and whether that was energy stuff, so water or electricity and that sort of thing, but because they were in massive inflationary period in the end of the 1960s leading into 1970s, these sort of neoliberal economists that were promoting these sort of ideas to government, they would say like, oh well, in order to decrease inflation, well, you need to push down workers' wages. You need to sell off all of those pretty little assets you've got on your books, and that will decrease the inflation. Yes, it did achieve that, but it also ended up putting which creating the multinational, which, as we were kind of focusing on before, in 2005 when David Harvey published this, because they had these neoliberals had basically invaded the public thinking of how our economy works. They were able to basically create a revolution where they got all these assets that used to be owned by the government, and they were able to run through in this kind of speculative world.
mm,
And
mm,
it is very interesting. Like,
mm,
one little caveat I'll also mention is there's a part of the book where David Harvey dedicates to non-government organizations, so to NGOs, and he basically goes on the massive history about it. That the funny thing about NGOs is they actually end up covering aspects of society that used to be in the remit of governments.
mm, mm,
And basically, like, whether that it's a non-government organization or that's a non-for-profit
mm,
that is looking for charitable donations and that sort of thing. um, if if it was, say, for example, an outreach program, traditionally that should be under the remit of a
mm,
government. But these charities, these non-government organizations, are stepping in a private property world and
yep.
doing what the government should be doing.